Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to what I can offer you as a master coach. I can help you to focus on your why with clarity, uniting your passion with your purpose with a plan to create the life you truly desire. Book a free 20-minute coaching call right now via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson/call, and we can take it from there. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Paul Dunn. Welcome, Paul.
Well, welcome, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And by the way, thank you, wherever you are, for listening to us as well.
Absolutely. So where is it you're tuning in from, Paul?
Well, all the way from Singapore today. So we're on the different side. In a sense, I'm in the future, I think, because it's about 8 hours ahead of you. So let me tell you that the last 8 hours, or the next 8 hours for you, going to be really good.
I love that you're in the future. That's brilliant. Is everything going to be okay? Is what I need to know.
Yes. Everything will be fine. Absolutely.
That's great. At least I've got guaranteed 7 hours
There
more
you
of
are.
my
You
life.
are. You have. Yes, you have.
All good. Paul, what is it that you're doing at the moment?
Oh, well, aside from talking with you, well, today is kind of interesting. So it depends if you mean, sort of micro or macro. So today I've had the privilege of working with a number of members around the world, helping them really get a sense on one of the things that I'm working on with a lot of people right now is in this age of, or this current phase, if you like, of uncertainty, and we may talk a little more about that later on, but the question is, how do you A, deal with that, and B, how do you take your business and as a result your life, if you will, to what might be called the next level? That doesn't mean there's something wrong with it now. It just means that there's sort of bigger contributions that we perhaps can make when we start thinking about things in a slightly different way.
Two things, Paul. Firstly, who are these members that you're speaking about? And also, what is it that you are expecting to achieve from the contributions?
Okay. So first of all, the members are mostly, not always, but mostly B1G1 members around the world. And the great thing is they're in different time zones, which means, typically, like, for example, if you take today, my day today started at 5:30 my time, which was 4:30 in the afternoon in New York. And it's going to go till about 8 o'clock my time, where I'll be talking with someone in South Africa. So they're like all around the world, which is really, really cool. And by the way, when I say that's really, really cool, I seriously mean that is really, really cool in the sense that in these particular times that we're in, I really think we have to think globally. For example, the mere fact that you're here on a podcast, I mean, just think about how many, and you've been doing that now, as I understand it, this is episode 333. That's a lot. I mean, that's a huge amount, right? And as a result, you might be living in some tiny little village in the United Kingdom, just like I did all those years ago. And but yet influencing people all around the world. How cool is that? It's such a cool thing to be able to do.
It really is. And it is just a phenomenal concept when it's mind-boggling in some respects.
Oh, it's absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, people think ChatGPT is mind-boggling, which it is. But the mere fact that we can connect like this, I mean, we never could have imagined that, right? We never could have imagined that. And now, and who knows where this will go, right? But I like what Brene Brown said about that. She said we were born to be connected, and then she said, that's what gives us meaning and purpose. It is this connection that is so important. And for those guys that are listening to us now, and also for the women as well, because the women you get what I'm about to talk about, and that is that we guys, we males, we handle things a little differently. And so, for example, one of the things we are known to do is to go and hide in our caves, and so we rather than sort of faces, and then we cut ourselves off. We get into that cave. There's no way we're going to come out of that cave. There's no way we're going to come out of it because we're in there thinking about ourselves. And then all of a sudden or maybe not all of a sudden, but after a while we come out, and then, eventually we reconnect again. So, and what happens when that happens is we seriously just disconnect. And when we disconnect, there's a lot of people, let me just go there for a minute, because, one of the things, if you're listening to us now, you probably realize that there is no script. We're just going, right? And hopefully going someplace which is of value to you. And so what happens when the males are in the cave, we totally disconnect. And what some people say is, well, what you should do is you should go inside and, look at what's inside. And I understand that. I seriously understand that. But I think there's a much better way, and that is to go outside, right? To look outside at what's there. And when you look outside, you start to see things in a different way. And you start to see, you mentioned the word contribution before. You can see things like, oh, you know what? I could make a difference to that, or I could, and it might be as simple as helping that, the quote unquote little old lady across the road kind of thing. It might be something like that. And all of a sudden, when you do that, you know what happens, right? The little old lady goes, oh, thank you. That was so nice of you. And so as a result, you smile, she smiles, oxytocin flows between us, and the world's a better place. Why? Because we connected. It's as simple as that. So, when Brene said that in her wonderful TED Talk all those years ago, connection gives us meaning and purpose. And then she says, that's what we're here to do. And again, that can be in all sorts of ways, like connecting like this without actually being face to face or whatever, but just connecting and sharing ideas and knowing that we belong, knowing that, as Seth Godin would say, people like us do things like this, and getting that sense of there's lots of things that we can do, not so much on our own, but together when we're all sort of focusing on all of those things that are out there that need to be focused on.
And you said, Paul, that you have to think globally. What is the impact of thinking globally?
Well, you think bigger. And by the way, that doesn't mean you should ignore what's going on locally. That doesn't mean that, right? But all of a sudden, you start to see things quite differently. I can remember, when in some of the B1G1 projects, for example, and you, I hope this is okay to talk about, but you just see things that you never realized you would see. For example, why is it that, let's talk Africa for a moment, or let's talk Kenya. Africa at the moment is in all sorts of load sharing problems and all that kind of stuff, or South Africa, but let's talk Kenya. And, why is it that in Kenya, the girls go to school 3 weeks out of 4? Why is that? Well, it's because of, the menstrual cycle, and sadly, they don't have the resources to, do all of that stuff that you have to do in a safe way. So guess what? They stay home. And you never really think about that. You just don't. In the same way, you don't think that there are people, and then sadly, I don't know why this happens, but sadly, they are mostly women and girls who, talking about Kenya, who have to go 2 hours to where the water is, and it's not exactly clean water. And then they fill up, one of these big yellow cans. And I did that once. I actually did that. I put that on my head. I could not go for more than 200 meters with that on my head. I couldn't. And yet these young girls are going, for 2 hours with this. And so all of a sudden you go, and by the way, what it also gets you into is, well, first of all, I can do something about that, right? What can I do? Well, in B1G1, I can make sure that people get access to water in a slightly different way than having to go and get dirty stuff from 2 hours away. So I can do that. And then the other thing that comes up as I think about that is that how shall I put it? Well, let me just put it like this. When I'm going, oh, poor me, I can't, I can't do that anymore, because it's automatic for me to think, goodness me, how lucky am I, right? And the moment we start to think, how lucky am I, then we come out of our caves and we start to get into gratitude, and different things start to flow for us and for the people that we connect with. I hope that's making some sense, by the way.
It does make sense. And explain to the listener the purpose-driven reason for the business that you have set up, that you founded.
Oh, as in B1G1, yeah. Okay. So B1G1 comes, all of us, Amy, have moments, don't we? Moments which someone once said to me, that where you are right now, where we are right now in terms of our business and our life, is really as a direct result of our reaction to the moments, right? So it's like boom and so on. So we all have those moments, and that moment happened to me when I was talking about mentoring before. I was mentoring this lovely, very tiny little Japanese lady who was from Australia. And she turned the mentoring session on its edge, or on its head, because normally if you're mentoring someone, you get to ask the questions. And she said in this lovely Japanese accent, "Can we do different today?" And I said, "Sure we can. What do you have in mind?" And she said, "Well, I like to ask you a question." So I said, "Okay, you can ask me a question." So, and here's the question, right? She said, it's really a what if question. I said, "Okay, go." She said, what if every time business was done, something great happened in the world? And I didn't really understand the impact of that question at the time. I was regarded as an Aussie bloke at that time. So I gave the Aussie bloke response, which was, "Oh, wow, that'd be really cool." And she was sensitive enough to know that I didn't really get it. And so she said, "I don't think you really get it." And I said, "Help me get it." And she said, "Well, and it was very obvious, by the way, that she'd been someplace before she got here. I don't mean she'd been on the town. I mean, she'd been, in some place thinking about this for quite some time." And she said, in my head, I call this a buy one, give one, which is what she said right then. And I said, "Okay, so how would that work?" And she said, "Well, you imagine you go to an electronics store and you buy like a big TV, like a huge TV thing, plasma kind of TV." And I said, "Whoa, did you say this is called buy one, give one?" And she, yeah. I said, "Well, that's a crazy business model, because when I go buy that plasma TV, they're not going to give me another TV. They're just not going to." And she said, "Oh, no, you misunderstand." Again, all in this beautiful, soft Japanese accent. And I said, help me resolve that dilemma." And she said, no. She said, "Well, you go and buy that TV because you want better vision, you want sharper pixels, you want brighter pixels, all of those things." And I'm nodding my head. And then she said, "So how would it be when you do that if somebody who could not see got the gift of sight?" And I went, "Oh, oh." And I'm surrounded by books as I am now. And she saw the book and she said, when someone buys an author sells a book, and imagine every time that happened, if a tree got planted. And I had a cup of coffee, which sadly I don't have at this point in time, but if I had a cup of coffee, and she said, "So imagine if every time someone bought or sold a cup of coffee, a child in need got access to life-saving water." And that was one of those moments that I'm so grateful that I had, because my question then was, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life? It's, and I'm so glad I did. I mean, that was an absolutely life-changing moment, because up until that point, I saw, I was regarded as I was a very successful business person, an entrepreneur, and people used to say to me, so Paul, what's your secret? How do you do all these things? And I used to say, well, there are only two things, right? And those two things are, right, first of all, you deliver amazing value to the people that you're privileged to serve. That's idea number one. And idea number two is you have fun doing that. That's it. And of course, I missed out on the third one, which is this one. That wouldn't it be great if every time you did that, something great happened in our world? So now I say there are three things. Okay, and I'm so glad that I say that because sometimes we think that when we're doing this kind of work, we think that the beneficiaries are the people that got the well, as opposed to having to walk, 20 kilometers or whatever the 2 hours, they're probably not going to do that in anyway, a long way in 2 hours, right? And we think that they're the beneficiaries, but and one day a 14-year-old girl said to me, she said, I was speaking at her school, and she's a very introverted young lady. Her name is Jessica. And Jessica said, she was introducing me. And I said, Jess, what one thing would you like me to leave with your colleagues? And she said, that's simple. I would love you to leave the idea that the people who we think are the beneficiaries certainly are the beneficiary in some ways, but we are the beneficiary. I went, oh my God. Out of the mouths of babes, right? And I got a lump in my throat just thinking about that, and you can see my eyes right now. How incredible is that? And we can see physically the impact of that on the people that we talk about as the beneficiaries. All of a sudden they've got water. It's right. They can go to the well and so on and so forth. Sometimes it's harder to see the benefits to us. It just happens, and we start to get that when we realize and can live more in gratitude than not, and that just brings on so many more things. I don't understand the way the universe works. What I do understand is when this gratitude plays, things seem to happen in a totally different way.
And what I love, Paul, is that story and the way you described it of getting the better vision. When you're choosing a television, you want better pixels, you want a better performance from it. And I can't help but see that your mentee gave you the gift of sight from a different lens. And potentially it was the first time that you saw life through the lens of purpose.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you. That is that's yes. I get it. That's very lovely, actually. Thank you for sort of completing that lovely circle. Very good. Love that. Thank you very much, Amy. Very good.
Well, I mean, it is the case. You said you don't understand the way the universe works, and who has the right answer, or who's to say that there is a right or a wrong answer?
There you go. How do you sort that one out? It's a challenging thing, and it changes moment by moment. How you see it also changes. I mean, I now, thanks to that, I now see that story differently, right? As a result of that. And again, I could have chosen not to accept your invitation to be here, right? But in other words, I could have chosen not to connect. But now I choose to connect. Enormous benefit from that. Yeah. And hopefully from those of you who are still listening to us, you kind of got that, oh, that's really cool. And you're so right. It is really cool. Thank you, Amy, for that.
Well, you mentioned that all of us have moments, and I think that was another example of a moment. And I talk about moments as well. I talk about how you can fill in the moments, or you can create moments that are fulfilling.
Oh, it's so powerful.
And I just wanted to dwell on the moments that we experience and the moments that we create. And that's where I feel purpose comes into this conversation, because it is very much the result of what we do and who we are that these moments are created. But it's also about recognizing them and really noting them and being present to them, because otherwise, being an entrepreneur as you are, you can continually evolve and look for improvement and then not appreciate the moment for what it is or the achievement for what it is.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true. And I mean, we sort of busily scooting around and all that kind of stuff, and that's why, that's why rituals and stuff like that are so important. I think it was James Clear. I think it is James Clear in Atomic Habits who talks about this whole idea that he basically says goal setting doesn't work. I mean, that's probably not the way he says it, but what he says is it's actually the rituals that we do each day that help us get to that point, right? So again, it's all about those moments, and it's how we start our day, it's how we end our day, it's where do we reflect, it's when we sit around the table with the kids. Do we say how's the food, or do we say what are you most grateful for today? Right? What do we do? Right?
I agree. And something else that James Clear said in Atomic Habits was that Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying bricks every hour. Okay. And it's a case of the repetitive actions. It's the case of how you do one thing is how you do everything. Yeah, it's the and I talk about this again. I talk about this a lot. It's about the mastery of the mundane. It's the little moments of every day that make all the difference.
Yeah, that's. By the way, and I love the alliteration on that too. The mastery of the mundane. That's very cool.
Yeah, I mean it is. And let's go back to a couple of things. And I love Brené Brown. Absolutely, that connection gives us meaning and purpose. Your business model, the B1G1, is built on connection. It ensures that people have a connection to the everyday work that they're doing to a greater good, to business for good. And what I want to sort of dive deeper into that is you talked about the impact of thinking globally, but this is more than that. It's not just thinking globally, it's taking action. And connecting your everyday actions to a greater purpose. Yeah.
I remember another moment. I haven't thought about this moment for a very long time, and by the way, when I say a very long time, let me give our listeners something interesting here. Today, I am very close to, in fact, I am, look at that, 29,000 days old, right? Today, how about that? And I remember everybody's now got their calculators out going, oh my God, really? And I I remember the first day I was dragged to a seminar before we understood what seminars were. And it was in 1980, and it was with the late James Rohn. And I didn't know who the heck James Rohn was. And I'm sitting in this room, and after that, at the time, I was running this very successful one of Australia's first computer companies. By the way, I discovered 6 months ago that I'm actually in the Australian Computer Museum. Believe that or not, yes, I am in the museum. And when I'm next in England, by the way, I'm speaking at the British Museum. I hope they don't keep me in. But anyway, and I'm doing my first. I decided, that instead of doing all of that, I could speak. I could try to move people to. And I remember the first session I did. And this guy, his name is Michael Shergold. I remember him all these, isn't that funny? I remember Michael for all these years ago. And Michael came up to me afterwards. At the time, he used to call me PD, and he said, GPD. He said, that was great. That was great. And I went, wow, that's so nice, Michael, And he said, but there's one thing I want you to remember. And I said, what's that? He said, the power of any idea is only ever in its implementation. All those years ago. Thank you for bringing that moment up too.
Yeah, I mean, wow. And to have been in the presence of, you call him James, I know him as Jim, but
Jim
Rohn.
I was say Jim Rohn. Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. The power of any idea. Repeat it again for me, please.
So the power of any idea is only ever in its implementation.
So let's go straight into that then. You have this incredible mentee who turned the conversation on its head. You then decided that you would like to mentor her for the rest of your life. What has happened since that conversation?
Oh, goosebumps have happened. So we decided, the first thing I decided was it didn't need to be about buy one, give one. It's got to be about everything. It's like B1G. It's let's remove the buy and the give. Let's just call it B1G1. So, I can automate things where, every time we're on Zoom, something great happens. Or I can be in a meeting with someone at the end of the meeting, give them a little note and say, please don't open this until I've gone. And then they open it, and inside it says, by the way, this was a great meeting. I loved it. And as a result of that meeting, this is what happened. 5 kids got access to it, or whatever it was. And so, every moment can be these kind of moments. And so the thing that we decided on years ago, we said there are going to be 3 things. Oh, how interesting. Because oh my goodness, episode 333, and there were 3 things that we decided which relate exactly to the conversation. How interesting is that? So the first, we said 3 things. First thing, when we do B1G1, it doesn't have to be, remember this was 2007, doesn't have to be what giving is typically about, which is, oh, you got $10, it doesn't have to be about that. What if we could do something where the minimum thing was like 1 cent? What if you could do something with 1 cent? And so that was when we said, well, it can't be about the money. It has to be about the impact that creates, right? And so B1G1 is all about impacts. That's the first pillar, if you like. And the second one is habit. Isn't that funny? Here we are talking about atomic habits and and so what that's basically said was, well, it's obviously very nice to do things like charity balls and all of that sort of thing, but we tend to go to those and we maybe feel guilty about something, and then we come off and often our sins are washed away, just because we went. But what if it wasn't about that? What if it was about the things that we just described? Here we are meeting on Zoom. Here we are doing a podcast. Here's someone listening to this. Here's someone opening it. What if it was all about that? That would be kind of interesting. And then the final thing, funnily enough, so we got impact, we got habit, and then the final thing is connection. And seriously, they're still up in the office. Impact, habit, connection. And I remember when we first started talking about that, people would go, oh, connection, yes. Oh, I can see it. If I do this thing, then I'll be able, that'll be great because customers will love it and they'll get more connected and everything else. We go, well, yeah, that's kind of true. That is true. But the biggest connection is not about that. The biggest connection is to you. And that's where it starts, when you feel really connected to something bigger than yourself. Bang, wonderful things happen. And here we are today, 300. Oh, this probably divides by 3. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's 319 and a bit, 319 million giving impacts, which is like, who could ever have imagined that? And who could have imagined that that was all those years ago, and it's still here, and it's still doing great things, and there's more impact creation going on than ever, in spite of the fact that we're in let's call them interesting times, when the tendency is to, and it's okay, right? The tendency is to put our mask on first, kind of thing. And to think about ourselves, but then to realize that greater things come when we start thinking outwards. I saw an article. I think I may have mentioned it to you last time we spoke. An article in Harvard Business Review, that august journal, which said, "You don't find your purpose, you create it." I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I say it all the time, and it is a case of you build it, you create it. Did you have any idea that your life was going to shift course on that day?
No.
Were you set for retirement, Paul, then?
Oh, well, I mean, I like what Zig Ziglar says about retirement, bearing in mind the 29,000 days. And Zig, when he was 83, someone said to him, by the way, 83 is a bit older than 29,000 days.
Yes.
And Zig, someone said to Zig, Zig, you're getting on. Don't you think you should slow down? And Zig said, well, no, because I figured I've got less days left, so I really should speed up, in relation to that. So, and that's how I see it. I seriously cannot imagine sitting on a beach under an umbrella, for the rest of my life. I mean, how can you look outward and not be curious about what's going on? I mean, how could you not be curious and have that wonderful sense of curiosity, and then go, wow, I wonder how that, I wonder if we could do that a little bit differently. I wonder, and so, that tends to be where I spend my time, thinking about this, and of course meeting with wonderful people like you, and having the privilege of sharing some thoughts as well, which, by the way, is a distinct privilege, and so thank you. And I'm really grateful to have that time where I can unscriptedly, because I had no idea where we were going to go, but I kind of like the fact that we didn't know where we were going to go, but it seems like we ended up, well, not that we've ended up, but we're kind of in a nice place as a result.
We never know where we're going to go when I record these episodes. And that I love that as much as each guest, for sure. And it is a privilege to be able to share thoughts. It is a privilege to be able to connect and discuss the knowledge that we have put in practice. And that again links very much to the reference you made earlier about implementing ideas, is something that I implement in terms of a quote I heard a long time ago, which was Anton Chekhov saying that knowledge is of no value unless you put it into practice.
There you go.
So having had our conversation a few weeks ago, the first one where I heard you speak about purpose and I heard you speak about business for good, I was straight. I literally became a member.
Yeah, you did. Oh my gosh!
On the call, whilst you were on the call, I became a member of B1G1. I was like, I have to do this for my business, and that was a case of taking action in the moment, knowing that it was the right thing to do. And so now, every time I coach a client or release a podcast, I make a donation, or I make an act of a giving impact. And that is how I feel that now Focus on Why is a business for good, because it is doing something great every time. And the ripple effects become even huge. So even though I'm having a one-to-one conversation with a client, or I'm having that one-to-one interview with someone, I know that the ripple effect is far greater. And they know that the ripple effect is far greater. And it's not just their actions that they're going to go on to do. It's what B1G1 allows me to do, and then enables so many people across the world. I mean, it's a phenomenal concept. It really is. It is phenomenal.
Well, thank you. And of course, it's really that's if I think quiet for a moment, it's because I'm just thinking about the fact that you would say that, and because sometimes when we are in the moment, we tend to forget the bigger moment, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's pretty cool that we can together do this and clearly create, as we were talking before, create, make a difference in the world, make a difference for people. I mean, when I think about those 319 million giving impacts, I mean, in my mind, and I've been fortunate enough to go visit with the people who are at the other end of the chain, if you like. And what you see, it's so interesting. What you see are just smiles. You see it. And so when I think of those, or when Masami and I think of those, or for that matter, any B1G1 member thinks of those people that we probably never will meet. The likelihood of us doing that is pretty tiny, unless you come on a B1G1 study tour. But the fact that there's someone else who's doing something that they would not have been able to do as a result of something that you did, and then something else that somebody else. It's like an amazing feeling. It really is. And to have, and this is the bit that I don't. I mean, I know it happens, but I can't articulate why it happens. So when, and you might have a take on it. So I sometimes say to people, this not only changed my life, that moment, but it gave me more of it. If that if that translates.
It does translate. It shifts the ability to live, and I discern the difference between existing, because you can exist without living, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yes, you can.
So when you say that it changed your life and it gave you more of it, again, it comes right back to that gift of sight that you had, that you were then aware of so much more to the world than was already in your space, in your world. And I love that web of good that you're not seeing being woven. It really is incredible that there are so many things, and you won't know what then that gift that you've given that young girl in Kenya of being able to attend 4 weeks every month of school would then go on to have, what the change will be.
Oh, well, the ripple from that, and the ripple, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So knowing now that I've incorporated purpose on a different level, because this is where I talk about purpose all the time, but taking the purposeful work of B1G1 into my daily work has given me, again, another level. It really has given me more of
that's
purpose.
So nice to hear. That is so nice.
It's great. I wasn't expecting to sort of, pitch the business so much, but it you can't but help, because it is such an incredible legacy that has been created here.
Well, thank you. And the other incredible part of it is that, there's this other level, isn't there, that you and I get to speak about it, and then people around the world get to hear about it, and boom, so yeah, it's that's why I can be curious all the time, like, how does that work? And people say, don't worry about how it works, Paul, just accept it. It's really cool, right? So
well, that seems like a really good place to say, if anybody wants to know how it works, how would they get in contact with you, Paul? What's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, very simple. They could do. I know that the podcast guests don't normally do this, but let me do it anyway. So if you wanted to go to B1G1, that's very simple. It's B1G1. By the way, some people in the United Kingdom call it Biggie. It's not. It's B, as in the letter B, followed by the number 1, followed by the letter G, followed by the number 1, and then a .com after that. And since, even though I'm in my work from home office today, that's also part of B1G1. If you put an @ before that and you put a Paul before that, then you can actually drop me a note and say, Harry, or whatever. So Paul at B1G1.com. Very simple.
Perfect. Well, I will make sure they're in the show notes, and so that people can get in contact with you and connect with you. Paul, what a gift of a conversation it's been today.
Oh,
it really has. Yeah. Phenomenal. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, we thank you for listening, whoever it is that you are right there, right now. Yeah. And isn't it cool? You can take that gift and say, by the way, you should also listen to this thing. It's like really cool.
It's a gift that keeps on giving. And as a final gift, have you got some parting words for the listener, please?
Oh. Okay, let's see if we can find something that summarizes where we. Okay. Let's try this. Yeah. Okay. Let's do this one. See if you can get the magic of this. When your vision becomes more powerful than your memory, your future becomes more powerful than your past.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What value have you received from tuning in? What are your reflections with actions? Please take a moment to leave me an Apple Podcast or Spotify review sharing how Focus on Why has made a difference to you today. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, simply connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.